just to give you a bit of a background, I'm speaking in the capacity that I was the Research Impact and Engagement Officer for Living Legacies from 2018 to 2020. So first off, I think I should probably stress from the beginning that Living Legacies as a centre is now finished. It has closed for business as of last year. However, elements of the centre's co-production endeavours continue with digital archives and advice, which can still be sought from our newly established Heritage Hub at Queen's University, which I'll elaborate on shortly. But whilst Living Legacies is technically no more, what I'm going to show to you today is a brief overview of the sorts of things that we have achieved, our models of operation, which you may find helpful in designing and developing your own projects, and the ways in which we have helped a variety of community groups during the first half of the centenary commemorations, and then direct you to a couple of our archived resources and models that you can avail of in terms of potentially developing your own project, getting funding support, and details of some community research upskilling. So for those of you who are unfamiliar with Living Legacies, we were set up in 2014 through generous funding from the Arts and Humanities Research Council with subsidiary funding from the National Lottery Heritage Fund. And we ran from 2014 until 2019, finishing definitely in 2020. We were one of only 5 AHRC-funded World War I engagement centres in the UK, and we were the only one in the north of Ireland, or Northern Ireland. And so Living Legacies really came about in part to address the challenges posed by the decade of centenaries for Northern Ireland in an attempt to broaden out the centenary narrative. The emphasis for this was a feeling that the centenary was being dominated intellectually by history with a capital H, shall we say, by historians, particularly military historians, with research focusing on regiments and risings and homegrown patriots. And so to that effect, the tagline "From Past Conflict to Shared Future" was adopted. And the real hope for the centre and what we moved and achieved to do was moving beyond the militaristic and developing a more inclusive programme of research within the decade of centenaries. That was a key tenet of the centre's work. So we endeavoured to engage with as many contemporary aspects as possible, including the legacies of the Spanish flu, women in leisure, the suffragette movement, developments and advancements in aviation history with the centenary of the RAF 100. And the home front, that had wider benefits and impacts going beyond the immediate localities of individual projects, that were ultimately then more critical and pluralistic in their approach. So to date, as you can see on the screen, we have had some wide spread appeal. We have developed and delivered and supported community groups across the UK and Northern Ireland, and we have presented and shared a lot of these local homegrown stories across the globe, from Calcutta to San Francisco, via Boston, via Zurich. So we've had quite a lot of outreach and appeal. We've had over 16,000 event participants during the 6 years of operation. We've supported nearly 500 events. We've supported nearly 120 community projects, and we've had several hits on social media and our website. But the overarching aim of the centre was to diversify the centenary narrative in the UK by incorporating Northern Ireland's experiences into the wider UK commemorations for the First World War period, but also to mediate and acknowledge the immediate contested narratives that we face in Northern Ireland around this period, particularly 1914 to 18 and around 2016, which held the potential for being particularly a contentious time with the commemorations of the Somme and the Easter Rising. But we did this through an engaged research programme with a specific model of co-production, co-creation and co-curation that was focused on inclusive heritage discourse. So by that we mean supporting and championing community-based initiatives, strengthening heritage sector relationships and partnerships, for instance, between universities, our museums, our libraries, peace facilitators, and non-governmental organisations within the UK, with project officers and centre investigators drawn from the northeast of England, from Wales, from Scotland, in addition to Northern Ireland. So over the 6 years of operation, what lay at the heart of Living Legacies work was instilling and sustaining trust amongst the disparate community groups that we were working with, be they in East Belfast, West Belfast, Derry, Newcastle, the Isle of Harris, but crucially engaging in community upskilling and public engagement. So as I touched on previously, we have supported over 120 community groups and projects across the United Kingdom through funding, through offering support and advice, through our researchers who have shared and championed local stories and impacts across the globe through research dissemination. So Living Legacies had three core themes: material, cultures and landscapes, which brought in elements of geography, archaeology and museum studies, digital heritage, and critical commemoration and creative practice. And the critical commemoration and creative practice would have included things like performance art, drama, art exhibitions, and in digital heritage, something that was crucial to Living Legacies Emma was offering training in effective digital research, digital storytelling, and safeguarding digital content for future research avenues. So our themes focused on providing sustained and resource access to expertise in research, resources, methods, techniques and funding, enhancing community engagement with the past and heritage, which has resulted in community-based exhibitions in local and national museums and libraries across Northern Ireland and England, publications, community-populated digital archives, and dramatic performances. So when Living Legacies was launched in 2014, the Centre and its team found themselves in an already crowded landscape of centenary events and projects. But what set Living Legacies apart was its model of relationship brokering, so breaking down those barriers between university academics and community groups, for instance. And we very quickly established ourselves as a credible and valuable member of this wider centenary network as we focused through our proactive engagement with groups and partners through offering training, advising and supporting groups. And this all culminated in a 5-day shared heritage festival throughout Northern Ireland in May 2019 as part of the cross-cutting activities of the 5 World War I engagement centres that were operating across the United Kingdom, and were all participating in their demonstrations of their achievements in their festivals throughout 2019. So if we turn to the lasting legacies of Living Legacies in terms of our lessons learned, what we did really well, and as a result, what sort of resources we can now share and make available to the public. So we were at the cornerstone of the entire operation was co-creation and co-producing products and projects. And by that we mean whenever we were approached by community groups with ideas for products, or if we went into the community to look for potential projects, the cornerstone of our operation was designing the project and making sure that this was sound and intact. And so by that, as you can see on the screen, we had a model of designing a project, so that we would initially start with scoping the project. How would you scope your project? What is it that you want to achieve? What are the audiences that you want to engage and gauge their support from? Through that, we would then move into research skills and materials, and we would design bespoke workshops. These are now available on our current, our newly refurbished website, which I'm going to touch on. We had a series of bespoke models for digital engagement, for drama, for material culture and artifact handling, for archiving your research, proper techniques and how to go about developing and delivering a sustainable research project. A number one priority for us was digital resourcing, making sure that you've safeguarded for the future. Secondly, then we moved on to public engagement, making sure that you were engaging with your audiences and making sure that everything was challenging, still engaging with whichever narrative was being put forward, shall we say, knowing your audience, and then archiving and sustainability. So as I've just mentioned, our number one takeaway for resourcing is to think about the digital. So think about digital sustainability. Maybe you've gotten funding for a terrific project and are starting to amass vast numbers of stories, collecting oral histories, records, newspaper clippings. But how are you going to make use of this content? How do you plan to disseminate your research efforts? How do you intend to safeguard this research for the future? So right at the outset, Living Legacies had a particular interest and expertise in the digital legacies of the Centenary. And in this regard, our partners at the Centre for Data Digitisation and Analysis at Queen's University, they were instrumental, not only in project managing the overall programme, but in ensuring that there was an integral, strong and resilient digital framework in place as part of Living Legacies community engagement and outreach activities from the very beginning when we began in January 2014. So our first resource for you to take away today is our newly refurbished Living Legacies website. So this is a legacy website that went live at the end of 2020, and you can see aspects of it there on your screen. And this was to tie into the end of the project's endeavours. So 2020 was our end point, and this is everything that took place between 2014 and 2020. There was previously a Living Legacies website, but we've now archived that website. You can still gain all of that content through this new website that went live in November in 2020. But in this new and improved legacy platform, you'll see that we have in operation 2 timelines. So what we've done is we've tried to collate a timeline of the key events of the First World War, including the run-up to the war and immediately after, which pulls particular focus on the effects of the war in Ireland and Northern Ireland. So it's a valuable resource in itself in that it has events that wouldn't perhaps normally be on the BBC bite-size World War I timeline. So we have the current incident, for instance, the Larne gun running, the Dublin lockout. What we've also then tried to do is to link these to our relevant community-based research projects that we supported, for instance, like East Belfast and the Great War, the Men Behind the Glass project at Campbell College, the Schenkel Great War project, showcasing some of the great work that we've helped and that has been achieved, and showcasing our methods and our outreach strategies. So many of the entries featured on the website have been penned by those that were operating firsthand, delivering the projects on the ground, including members of various community groups, university researchers, heritage stakeholders, and our project officers that operated from across all 4 nations of the UK. And we're so very grateful to our contributors, not only for their time and their effort in presenting their reflections on their projects to the website, but also for all of the significant investment that they put into the projects themselves. So the majority of these links and these entries will have subsidiary links to other websites, like some tabs for recommended further reading, other resources that may be of use to you, a similar type of project, how they got their funding, and what their ultimate outputs were, something like that you might want to emulate. Also on the website that might be of interest is the Living Legacies Digital Repository. And this is a vast digital archive of just under 19,000 community objects, stories and oral histories that were digitally captioned by the Centre for Data Digitisation and Analysis, their expert team, during 2014-2016 through a series of World War I and New Antiques Roadshow style events. And this has really helped to build up a more complete archive of that 1914-1919 period in Northern Ireland. And in September 2015, we were fortunate enough to continue this digital capture when we extended it into the engagement centres in the Northern Tour, which was a tour throughout Newcastle, Leeds and Manchester, where we also gathered relevant oral histories and community-generated objects and stories which have been featured into our archive. So while all of the Living Legacies community projects and partners were encouraged to engage digitally with the Centre and to employ digital methodologies within Living Legacies projects through the workshops, through outreach initiatives, it was clear early on that there would be a major challenge in maintaining and sustaining this digital legacy of the Centenary for the future. So Living Legacies carried out an extensive research programme into the challenges around co-production of digital heritage and the fragilities of community-generated digital historical content that was being carried out. And we drew on interviews and observational analysis of Living Legacies funded projects and of digital history projects that had developed some digital content. And despite ongoing concerns for digital legacies of this centenary period as a whole, not just for the First World War period, but the entire decade of centenaries, the community-based and produced digital content from the centenary and the majority of community-based research undertakings, their sustainability still remains a bit of an issue. And so to address this, Living Legacies and CDDA established and launched in 2019, going backwards, a new and bespoke World War I Community Platform. And this was a very ambitious and demanding outreach programme in 2018 that was funded by the Arts and Humanities Research Council as a supplementary project. And CDDA and Living Legacies researchers contacted National Lottery Heritage funded community projects and groups across the UK, as well as other cognate groups, partners and projects, including the HRC engagement centres, to create a digital repository that was structured, secure and searchable and sustainable for future research avenues. And so it was the World War I Community Platform. I think there's, at the moment, there's about 100 community projects from around the United Kingdom. They're grouped into themes, into locations, on various aspects of the 1914 to 1918 period, and not just the war, but including the suffragette movement, women and leisure, gender and equality, and sport and leisure. Apologies. Additionally, we've also posted on our Living Legacies all of our toolkits and our learning materials on our website. They continue to be freely available for use and will remain in place, accessible for community groups and outreach projects. And they focus on our main themes of digital legacies, drama facilitation, critical commemoration, museums and material culture. They're all there for you to download and to make use of in developing your own projects. And finally, our last, our third takeaway is that at the end of 2020, we distributed a case study booklet or a toolkit entitled Inclusive Heritage in Practice, which highlights some of the lessons learned from our 6 years of the Centre's activity and showcases some of our terrific community-led and co-produced projects. So we took inclusive heritage as our core theme, which has always been the leading tenet for the Living Legacies Centre. And Living Legacies accumulated much that is of wider significance and interest from these centenary community-based research projects. So sharing this more widely was the aim of the toolkit for those working in the heritage sector, as well as in public policy and community engagement. And the case studies presented in it might offer some ideas and methods for promoting a more inclusive heritage in future research initiatives as we draw towards the end of the decade of centenaries. So hopefully, I realise I'm now at my designated time. So hopefully, you'll find some of our resources of use. Although we are fully aware that as helpful as they may be in establishing models to copy and codes of best practice, for instance, we run the risk of losing nuance and creating prosaic formulas for commemorative activity, rather than being fluid and adapting and adopting as we are presented with whatever presents itself. But these resources and all of those that we've seen so far today are providing terrific groundwork, especially in acknowledging that our conflicted and tumultuous past can and should be used, not as a problem to be solved, but as a solution to bridging community divides and troubled pasts and presents. So as I mentioned at the beginning of this talk, Living Legacies is no longer in operation, but we are continuing in some guise as the newly formed Heritage Hub at QUB. So if you just Google Heritage Hub at QUB, you'll find us, drop us a link, and we'd be only too delighted to chat and chat through any development projects that you might have in terms of the further decade of centenaries commemorations.